Hello beautiful people and welcome to another video. As you can see, this is probably the worst piece of furniture I've ever come across, and on top of that, it was painted with lead paint, which means it was going to be incredibly difficult to work with. But I decided to make it a personal challenge and see if I can actually make anything useful out of this, because as you will see, this is completely rotten and it's just not usable at all. What the heck? I think this is the longest I've ever taken to complete a project, and you will see why. I hope you enjoy the video and appreciate the amount of work I put in it. I also want this video to be a testament to the fact that even in the ugliest piece of furniture, there is beauty to be found if you look hard enough. This is all rotten and there's woodworm damage really bad, so I'll need to replace it. This is just completely rotten and destroyed by woodworm. Yeah, that's not gonna work. In case you're wondering, you're not supposed to be able to do this with your bare hands. And this is just completely rotten. I can literally just break it with my hands. And look how thick this is. The original hinges, 2 of them were broken into pieces, and the remaining 4 were covered in 3 layers of paint. The trim I'm removing right now is in such a state that I'm not even going to try to restore it. These nails look quite old, so this is just an indicator of when this piece was made. And by looking old, I meant they were square. So these are the sides of the cupboard, and the bottoms were completely rotten, so I had to cut them off. Sometimes I get myself into a project that makes me question what I do, and I think this is one of them. It's gonna take a while. Challenging projects like this one can test your resilience and make you want to quit. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot that helps me stay focused, productive and motivated, and unlike energy drinks or coffee, doesn't give me that caffeine crush. It's loaded with vitamins, organic highest grade matcha, and mushrooms, as well as herbs. There is also Magic Mind Sleep, which helps you fall asleep faster and wake up refreshed. You can mix Magic Mind with oat milk, ice or sparkling water. I first partnered with Magic Mind last year, and I feel that since then my mind has been clearer and more focused, but I also like that Magic Mind is 100% carbon neutral and also helps homeless communities and mental health charities. You can try Magic Mind for yourself with a huge 45% discount if you follow my link in the description. I guess no one said this was going to be easy, so let's do it. That took absolutely forever and the amount of work was brutal, but That's what I thought was the safest to deal with the lead paint, because I had a very good filter connected to my thicknesser and I had the door open and also used PPE. I'm not sure if you saw it, but there was actually veneer underneath those 3 layers of paint, so that was the original look and that's what I'm going to do. There was no other way of taking these doors apart because they were just too rotten, so I had to cut through the joints. Also, all the edges and ends of the boards were just completely destroyed and rotten, so I had to use my planer and just shave off a little bit. I also had to shave off quite a lot from the doors because, as you can see, the edges are just completely ruined, and this will come back to bite me as you will see later. I'm just making sure I've got all the pieces to put it back together. Because these two were not glued together, but I will glue them. I'm going to veneer the inside of this cupboard before I glue it together, and then I'm gonna put veneer over this whole thing on the outside once it's glued together, because I think this will be the easiest. I think the original veneer was oak as far as I can tell, but I'm going to upgrade this cupboard and make it look fancy because, you know, I'm fancy, and I'm gonna use cherry veneer. It would have been 100% easier to just make it from scratch and probably much quicker. So because this wood is literally trash, it's so badly rotten and eaten by woodworm, I can't really do anything with it unless I strengthen it a little bit, or it will just fall apart. And I mean it, I could just break each of those pieces with my bare hands. The way this works, you basically saturate the wood with it and just leave it for a couple of hours, and it really makes it harder. I'm going to do this to all the pieces, and I will let it dry for about 2 hours and scrape off the excess hardener with a wire brush. It also stinks really bad, so I wore a mask. For this project I used 2 4x6 sheets of cherry veneer, which is about 250 pounds, probably $300. And I used spray contact adhesive because otherwise I think it would have taken me at least 2 more weeks. And yes, I had to apply it on every single part of this cupboard, and there were many parts. And also had to do it on both sides. If you feel like there is a lot of veneering in this video, that's probably about 10% of what I actually did. Other than the fact that this cupboard was originally covered in veneer, I also used veneer because it will give it additional strength, and it needs all the strength it can get. At this point I'm not wearing a mask because I'm not creating any dust, and I also clean my workshop properly.
$2,000 later.
Because I had to cut through the joints, I'm going to recreate them using dominoes. I don't have a bigger cutter, I keep forgetting to buy one, but this should be strong enough. To help you understand how difficult this was, this cupboard wasn't particularly straight to begin with, but I had to replace some of the parts completely, and every single part I put through my thicknesser, which basically changed the thickness a little bit, and also the width of some of the pieces, which made putting it together incredibly difficult. I also applied veneer to every single piece on both sides, which also altered the size of those pieces. So yeah. And on top of that, I removed the entire base and replaced it with a new piece of plywood. So not only I'm trying to save this piece of furniture, also make it look better, but I had to come up with multiple ways of hiding the imperfections, and there were quite a few of them. To put the carcass together, I'm just using regular wood glue because this is quite fragile and I just want it to stay together, and I hope no one will ever need to take it apart again. And to add insult to injury, this was made from pine, which is soft wood, so that definitely didn't help. And the piece of plywood that I'm adding to the bottom of this cupboard wasn't completely flat, which I realized after I attached it. To attach the bottom to the cupboard, I used a couple of nails just to hold it in place, and then I drilled a bunch of holes and I used dowels. And for the back, which I took off and it wasn't usable, I used a bunch of tongue and groove boards, and I think that looked semi-original. I applied cherry edge bending to all the edges, and there were many. And to make this even more fun, all the notches that were originally cut out for the hinges, they were just completely worn out and I had to repair them or remake them. Oh, and that was fun too. I'm basically trying to use one long piece of veneer to create a waterfall effect, but that's actually not necessary because of what I'm going to do next. I don't actually know what was the purpose of this cupboard. It looks to me like maybe a drinks cabinet or something of that sort. If you have an idea, put them in the comments. I got this piece of trim that I want to put on here, but it's got this little lip and I don't actually need it because I can't use it. It wouldn't be long enough, so I need to take it off. And if you remember, there was trim on this piece originally. It had a different shape, but this is just what I'm doing. And that's mainly because the look of this cupboard was really outdated, so I'm just trying to make it a bit modern, but also make it usable. So I basically ran out of veneer and decided to just stain the bottom instead of applying different type of veneer, and these are the legs that I decided to go with. Here I'm just plugging the screw holes for the hinges because they were just too worn out. Obviously I use brass nails for the trim because, you know, I'm fancy AF. Unfortunately I can't use these because they're too deep and this bit won't open, so I'll need to cut a piece of wood and just fill this gap and redo it, which is a bit of a pain. Like this whole project pretty much. I got a piece of solid cherry and I'm just going to cut this piece and glue it in. This doesn't need to be pretty because I'm about to cover it. I actually made completely new notches for the hinges on the opposite end and then cut off a little piece of the original end and replaced it with a bit of trim. And Bob's your uncle. I also decided to use a different type of trim for the insides of the doors just to make them look a bit more fancy because they were quite plain. And that also allowed me to hide the edges of the veneer that didn't go all the way to the end of the floating panel because otherwise I wouldn't be able to make it fit. And I also used a piece of trim to tidy up the area around the hinges and basically make this edge look a bit nicer. To attach the trim, I just use super glue and activator because no one's going to touch it, and that's plenty strong. And I didn't want to put any nails in that floating panel because it was barely hanging on anyway. I mean, I'm joking because it was alright, but there were already a lot of holes in that panel from woodworm. This cupboard originally had 2 or 3 shelves, I can't even remember, but I'm gonna make just one because first of all I don't have any veneer left, so I'm just going to use this piece of plywood. And 2, I might add a shelf later on if I want to because it's not going to be difficult. I was going to put veneer on the front of this shelf, but I'm going to add this trim detail. This cabinet is all sorts of wonky and crooked, so it's not easy to work with it, and to be honest, I'm just trying to find ways to kind of hide all those imperfections so it looks a bit better, but it is a challenge. So these nails cannot be centered because this plywood isn't thick enough, but this trim kind of lets me fake it and make it look like it is thicker than it really is, if it makes sense. I think I might actually end up attaching this shelf to the sides permanently just to give this cupboard more rigidity, and I can just use L bracket, but I'll do it later. So I've changed my mind. Surprise, surprise! And I'm actually going to install a much bigger piece of trim, and this will serve two purposes. A decorative one, but it will also prevent the doors from opening. Because there was some sort of lock on the door originally, but I'm not going to reuse it because it's just not great. So I actually managed to save 4 of the original hinges. 2 of them were just broken and in pieces, so I'll use these for the doors. The paint stripper worked, but there is still quite a lot of paint on it left, and because there is lead in this paint, I don't really want to use my wire wheel, so I'll soak them in acetone and see if this will do the trick. And the hinges were made of steel, so I ended up painting them so they would match the rest. I've also added this trim to the edge of the door because I'm fancy AF. Final inspection. Any good? Pause up. I think it's a yes. Mando says this is the way. As always, quick shout out to the channel members, you guys are the best, and to everyone else for watching my videos, liking and commenting, because that helps to keep the lights on in the shop. And if you want to support what I do, all the links are in the description. Thank you. I can't believe I'm almost done with this. This has been the most difficult and challenging project I've ever done, and I wanted to give up, I think, at least 5 times. Before I put the oil on, there is a small gap just because I forgot that I actually cut off the edges because they were rotten, and I forgot to extend the doors a little bit. So I'm going to actually put a bit of trim over here and it will close the gap. And I'll install these handles because there's a little bit of brass and some black, so it just goes with this whole design. And I think I'm gonna put one over here so you can actually use the handle to lift this lid. And I'll show you the final results when I'm done. I also installed these latches so you can actually lock the cupboard, and they also make it look cool. I'm going to add a little bit of pigment because I want the veneer to blend in with the black elements a little bit, and also just to give it some depth. And also to remove the redness from it because I'm not too crazy about it. It looks like this oil has low VOC, so I don't need the mask. As you can see, this pigmented oil made a huge difference, and I hope you agree with me that it helped to tie the black and the veneer together and just made this whole piece. And I think it's just absolutely perfect. Does this make you think of an old steamer trunk, or is it just me? I did not expect that this would look the way it's looking, and I absolutely love it. Thanks again to Magic Mind for sponsoring this video, and guys, don't forget to check out the link in the description for a huge 45% discount with my special link. Enjoy the final results, and I'll see you in the next video.